With me now is Stuart Trew, international trade policy researcher with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Good Monday morning to you, Stuart. So,
hey, Marcia.
How punishing would an additional 10% tariff be on various sectors already facing very steep tariffs?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have a ton of effect on, say, steel or aluminum. They're facing 50% tariffs right now. If he were to apply it to the 35% or that is affecting all Canadian trade, or 30%, that wouldn't also have that much an effect because those tariffs aren't in place, right? If you recall, those were paused. The Canadian-wide tariffs have been paused. CUSMA compliant goods are going through tariff-free. So, we have no idea. We also don't have a timeline. I don't expect we're ever going to see this additional 10%. Something's going on. Trump's been irked, obviously, by the ad. He's kind of lashed out with something that, he thinks might affect the negotiations, whatever they are, right, on aluminum, steel, and energy. And so I don't expect we're going to see them. And if we do, they wouldn't have that big an effect, even if they were on the sectoral tariffs, I believe.
So let me ask you, first of all, what does this say to you about Trump's methodology? Is he using tariffs as a weapon?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, that's his MO, right? He's a tariff guy. He loves these tariffs. They are very much being used to get U.S. interests abroad, in Canada, in Mexico, and in other countries. We saw this in the Malaysia and Cambodia deals that were announced on the weekend. These countries have basically agreed to maintain tariffs of about 20% on all of their exports to the United States. Meanwhile, they've agreed to basically go along with the U.S. security agenda with respect to critical minerals, with respect to China and kind of screening certain kinds of investment, and not putting up any barriers to U.S. digital companies of any sort, right? Like taxes perhaps on digital services, or any measures that would help those countries bolster their own domestic tech competition for these big companies like Amazon, Meta, and so on and so forth. So Trump's getting everything he wants, right, through the use of tariffs, and that's very much the objective. And I think we should be looking at those Malaysia and Cambodia deals and asking ourselves if we'd be willing to put up with that kind of deal, because that's what's on offer. And there's no dispute settlement. That's the big thing for Canada. We're facing a future where I think the CUSMA is probably going down the tubes, going down the pipes. Trump does not like dispute settlement. It's a world where, whatever they want goes. And if they don't like what you're doing, they put tariffs back on your country. And we see that in the Malaysia and Cambodia agreements. And I have a feeling that's where we're heading as well. So we're going to have to go along with the new agenda, whatever it is, on security, on a common external tariff on Chinese products, so on and so forth. And we have no way to hold the Americans accountable to whatever agreement we're about to sign. So it's a strange new future, but that's the one we're dealing with.
And it seems as though when you listen to Mark Carney, he has accepted that strange new future, Stuart. Yeah. What do you make of what we are hearing from him, first of all, on negotiating with Trump, and also on the pitch that he has been making and will continue to make while he's overseas?
Yeah, well, the pitch, I took some good news in the announcement from Carney today, I believe, that the Trump administration isn't interested in this big new security arrangement that the Canadians were pursuing or were selling. This idea that, we would go even further than we have already, perhaps, in terms of integrating our defense and border and national security infrastructures and agencies in a way to appease the Americans. They're not interested in that, and that was very much the old way of Canadians, government doing things, right? We pitch greater security cooperation, they open the border. So, I feel kind of good about that. At the same time, the deal that they were preparing, while it might have had some relief for aluminum and steel, it was going to leave other sectors like lumber and auto out to dry, right? So we can't, I think, go forward like that. Maybe a sectoral deal on steel would be some kind of solace for the sector. It would bring prices down to some extent across the manufacturing sector. But we really need some kind of either arrangement with Trump on auto, or we have to start thinking about what we do with that sector. If we're not producing for the American market anymore because those companies are leaving, what are we going to do with that capacity? And so that's the big question. And so I think maybe, as Carney said, Prime Minister Carney said, we should look at the budget a little bit more closely to see what he's doing to really bolster Canadian manufacturing. I think that's where we have to put our money. at this point because the Trump talks, they're going nowhere fast.
Stuart, thanks so much. Good to see you as always. Stuart Trew is an international trade policy researcher with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Well, speaking of Canada's auto sector, it's facing what some experts say is an existential threat thanks to Trump's trade war. The number of cars produced in Canada has already dropped by more than 50% in the last 2 decades. CTV's Colton Prale breaks it all down for us.
We don't want your cars, in all due respect. They're losing a lot of companies in Canada. He wants to make cars, we want to make cars, and we're in competition.
Donald Trump has been very clear. Vehicle manufacturing in Canada needs to come second to American production. Now, this Canadian business leader says Canada needs to consider cutting its losses.
There are a lot of jobs at stake in the auto industry. They're not coming after our parts sector, they're coming after our cars.
Canada's auto sector took a pair of heavy hits in October. Tuesday, General Motors announced it's ending production of its electric parcel van at the plant in Ingersoll, Ontario. The move came days after Stellantis announced planned production of the Jeep Compass in Brampton would happen in Illinois instead.
Making the vehicles is, pound for pound, about twice as valuable as making most parts.
Experts call Trump's policies an existential threat to the industry, but warn they'll take time to come into full effect.
Putting up a new automotive assembly plant can cost anywhere from $5 to $6 billion and take anywhere from 7 to 8 years.
Meanwhile, American auto giants announced massive windfalls this week after new White House subsidies for U.S.-produced vehicles.
The changes in policy, the proclamation that happened last Friday, gave us $1 billion of benefit.
Detroit's big three automakers make up 20% of the roughly 700,000 light vehicles made in Canada in the first half of 2025. This week, Ottawa punished GM and Stellantis for decreased Canadian production by lowering the number of vehicles they can import into the country tariff-free. This former auto exec says those measures should instead focus on boosting Canadian production from non-American automakers.
I think as we move forward and look at, what's the industry of the future, you want to put as many incentives in place that don't cost taxpayers money.
Meanwhile, Ford says it still plans to build new Super Duty pickups at its Oakville plant in 2026, even after Donald Trump announced new tariffs on trucks. Heather.